Okay, YouTubers, this is Joe from ArtAlienTV. Another quick game of Interplanetary I Spy going on here for all you space geeks and space freaks and Pareidolia police out there. Today we're looking at a really early couple of images from Sol 37 from the Curiosity Rover. This image was actually taken in 2012, only literally about a month after the rover actually landed on the surface of Gale Crater on Mars. In Gale Crater, I should say. And this is quite a good image, actually. And there's two things here, which I'm going to show you straight away. This is a cat, and this may be a cat goddess. Now, they're both a little bit unclear, but I'll show you the cat first, because that was a bit closer. Now, other people have interpreted this in a different way, which is cool. And there is some interesting details on here. But the part of the carving we're looking at really is this bit, and that is a cat head. And I put a little clip of a cat, an Egyptian cat figurine there, just to compare it. Let's zoom in a bit, let you see that. Now, I appreciate this isn't very clear. In fact, if you get too close, it doesn't get any clearer. So I'm just going to draw around what I'm seeing here. And I mean, you may think differently, of course. But you can see it, if you look at this, it's very similar in shape. You've got the nose here. You've got an eye here, quite a clear eye, with eye detail coming around like that. Okay, you've got a mouth with some teeth detail there. Chin here. Snout kind of sticking out there. The head kind of comes up like this. I think this may be an ear sticking up here, but it's very vague. It does look as if the image has been kind of blurred out or manipulated to a point. There's an ear here. You can see the internal part of the ear there. There's some ear highlight there. And the head comes around like this. Now, I don't know what this represents behind it. It's very odd. Now, this, I would say, must be attached to something lower down in the ground, because we got this part coming off the back here that seems to be hovering above the ground. Now, in order for that to hover off the ground, it must be attached to this, which it does look like. But there must be something in the ground, like a body coming down like this, for this to be able to stick out above the ground like that. Okay? There are no hovering rocks on Mars. Lots of people have shown pictures of what look a bit like hovering rocks, but they're not. They're optical tricks in very low quality images where you have a black rock on the ground and another rock behind it, and the black rock below looks a bit like the shadow of the rock behind and above it, but it's not. There aren't hovering rocks. There are things flying about, like the UFOs and even what seem to be birds, but there we are. So this is what it is. This is a cat. In my opinion, this is a cat, and it's very similar to this one here. In fact, I've got some images of cats and things up here just to compare them to. Now, there is a goddess, a goddess, yes, from Egypt, ancient Egypt. There was a goddess called Bastet, and I've got the Wikipedia page up here. Now, it does seem that the Martians also worshipped or had very similar gods and goddesses. And basically, Bastet is a female god of pregnancy, fertility, children, music, arts, and warfare. Okay. Now, this could explain why there are so many cat carvings and sphinxes, not only in Egypt, but also on Mars. And I'm going to show you a couple of those in a minute. Now, the other thing I was going to show you was a bit like this. Now, this is something I was looking at, a concept called morphological architecture, or the architecture of morphology. Now, these are related to architecture, but also art, and constructing various types of architecture, but also similar concepts are used throughout history in art when constructing morphological pieces or figurines or carvings or sculptures, whatever you want to call them. there is architecture in the human body shape, and also some of these gods and goddesses had very strange animal attributes, like a lot of them were related to monkeys or elephants, especially in the Hindu culture, but also in Egyptian culture. Many ancient cultures actually had animal gods, and this is something that is common throughout the ancient cultures of Earth. And I would expect something similar on Mars. And that's what we're seeing. Now, unfortunately, these images aren't that clear, but this is a cat. It doesn't have to be clear for it to be a cat. It's just got to be clear enough for you to recognise it as a cat. But there it is. Once you've seen it, you can see you've got an eye here, and an eye here, and a nose, and a sort of upper lip mouth area coming round like a cat would, just like this. Very similar to this here. It's got this kind of cheekbone, this sort of like chubby kind of cheekbone area, just like this has here. And we've got a chin almost identical to the one in the clip, just here. It's a cat. That's what it is. I don't really understand what this is behind it. There may have been another thing attached to it, like another part of the carving or something, or another creature facing the other way or something like that. I have found figurines and carvings of double heads looking in two directions, and some possible with three. So there's lots of strange and interesting kind of gargoyle type creatures that I've found. We also have this thing. Now this is further back in the image. If I show the image on here, now the cat is here and the figurine is back here. There's some other interesting things around, but they're not very clear. It's really, really strange, this one. And it looks like a figurine of Bastet, perhaps. Now it's very blurry because it's quite a long way off from the Rover. I would say this is like 50 feet away or possibly more, whereas the cat's much closer. The cat is less than 20 feet. This is a figure, and it doesn't look very clear. It's quite small. I would say it's only about a foot tall or less. But because it's further away, we don't see a lot of detail, but what you can see is a human figure, or a human cat, perhaps, hybrid figure, who knows. It reminded me of this. What you've got with this thing is, there we are, a knee sitting position, almost cross-legged, but with a knee sticking up here. With this one, hair, long hair coming down. Now some of these have elaborate headdresses and headgear, as do a lot of the Egyptian statues and gods and goddesses. A bit like this one here. Now this is also Bastet, the female cat goddess from Egypt, ancient Egypt, with big headgear on, right? Now often this goddess is depicted more human-like and sometimes more cat-like, and sometimes in between, okay, depending on what period you look at of ancient Egyptian art. And what we've got here, basically on Mars, is something very similar, with that headgear coming right over like this. There's the head, the chin here. Let's do that again. Let's get a bit closer. Now you're not going to see a lot of detail here because it's out of range, but it's just enough in range for us to work out that there's an ear here, the chin coming round like that, eye here, nose here, mouth here, and the head kind of comes round like that. And it looks like there may be a knee sticking up here, like that one I just showed you, or a knee sticking out. It doesn't quite make a lot perfect visual sense, but there's an arm, there's the shoulder here, arm coming down like this, a hand here, there's another hand here, other arm coming up, this is the wrist of the other arm, and the upper arm coming up like this, okay? And we've got the body, and what looks like a knee here sticking out, that's a knee, and I think the knee, the leg would have been folded back in a sort of crouched, kneeling, well, in a sort of kneeling position perhaps, or perhaps it's buried, and perhaps the knee, the leg might come under like that, like in a cross, sat cross-legged, perhaps like one of these other things, like a bit like that, perhaps. Of course, some of this is probably damaged and buried, so we're not seeing the whole thing. But let's get a bit closer. It's difficult to see. It's very blurry. It's out of visual range, and I haven't actually enhanced it very much here. Let me try and brighten that up considerably and see if we can get some more brightness into the image, and see if that will stand out a bit better for you. There we are. Right, there we are. That's better. So I'll put a brighter version of this in at the end as well. So you can see, once you get your head round it, you can see it. It's blurry. In fact, it looks slightly sharp, slightly better in the smaller image here, because when you enlarge these things, they get more kind of fuzzy sometimes. So there it is. It's a sitting figure with either long hair or headgear on. I would imagine this is some kind of headdress coming round like this. You can actually see the edge of it there, and the chin. I can't work out whether this is male or female. There's not enough real detail in the breast area here, but the arm you can see coming down. Of course, this has probably been sat here. It could have been sat here for a million years, and only recently uncovered. This could have all been covered in mud and or sand and stuff, and the wind could have gradually eroded it away. It seems to be flat. This area, very flat. Why would a figurine be sat in the middle of nowhere? Well, it's not nowhere, it's Gale Crater, an important burial area, and ceremonial figurines like this I've found all over the place. Animals, people, sphinxes, you name it, I found it. And other people have found some as well, not just me. But I've found about 50 so far, similar things to this. And there are cats, there are a few cats, there are lots of kind of sphinx-like carvings and structures, burial structures like gravestones and grave markers and small tomb markers, that kind of thing. So there's lots of these things in the area. This is by no means the only one or two. So if you're new to this channel, before you try and crucify me verbally, at least do me the favour of looking at some of the things at the end of the video that I'm going to show you in a minute. I will put some other examples of these in for you to compare. And if you want to check out like playlists and stuff, there's a playlist I did years ago called Mars Sphinxes and Statue Heads. Okay, and there's a perfectly good example of another cat here. So they were into cats. So the Bastet goddess kind of fits with this concept. There are female and male statues, mostly male from what I can see. The warrior headstone one was good here. That's like a really interesting headstone there. So there's probably about over 60 or 70 of these. There are also loads of like actual skulls and things like mummified heads and skulls all over the place and calcified remains. But on the whole, what we're seeing with a lot of these things are actual carvings and sculptures made probably of the local clay in the lake, from the lake bed, which comes in a number of colours. It comes in sort of blues, yellows, browns, reds. I've not seen any green, although some of them do have a green tint. So there are loads of these things, including one of Hanuman, the ancient god, monkey god of the Hindu religion. So what this points at is not only is there like giant sphinxes like this one here, which are from our Egyptian culture, but there also seems to be some kind of Hindu culture going on Mars as well, or something similar. Now, what does that mean? Does it mean that our ancient civilizations like in India and in Egypt and places like this were worshipping real gods that came from Mars? And did those gods visit Mars from somewhere else? This really throws up some very interesting questions about what was going on in the distant past and why are these gods looking the way they do, shaped like animals and representing different creatures like cats, cats and dogs and monkeys and all sorts of other things like elephants and stuff. Why is that? What's going on? Is this an indication of some kind of hybridization that was going on in the ancient world, perhaps from Mars or elsewhere? It certainly looks like there's some sort of connection here. This one was pretty cool as well. I think this was found by Billy Carson, in fact. The Sphinx head here, very cat-like. And some of these look kind of almost like Buddhas. Some of them look kind of Hindu. Some of them look very Egyptian. Some of them look extremely alien, like this one here. It's like an insectoid. So there's a real cross-culturalization going on here on Mars in the past. And some of these things look very similar to some of the things we have down here in our ancient cultures. So do check this out, Mars Sphinxes and Statues. That's an old playlist, but it's got a lot in there. There's also this interesting article about Mars. NASA developing technology for self-sustaining human colony on Mars and how they're going to build stuff on the surface. And it goes into the architectural kind of designs and concepts of some of these things, which are really interesting. So I'll put a link to that down below. I won't redo that now, but it's some really cool information and illustrations here. So we've got what looks like a figurine, a bit like this, in stature or in pose, I should say. It's in a similar pose to this, but with the arm kind of coming down towards the other hand. And it's very similar to what we've got in this image here, but it's sort of round the other way, almost. So this looks like a knee here, and an arm. Definitely that looks like an arm. And there's some details here, like it's kind of holding something there, or there's some kind of detail here. I don't know if you can see that. Let's get a bit closer. There's the figurine. So this is one of many. There are in fact dozens and dozens of these figurines and animal figures and cats and all sorts of things like sphinxes depicted and represented here on Mars. So what we have to ask ourselves is, did they have some of the same gods and goddesses that we had thousands of years ago on Earth? It certainly looks like they did. Not just from ancient Hindu culture or Buddhist culture, but Egyptian culture as well. I've even found statues that look like ancient Greek statues on Earth, like Apollo and stuff like that. I mean, if you go through this, you'll find that some of these things look like they were from ancient Greece. There's this massive statue-looking thing that looks like Colossus up on the mountain. Huge it is. It's about 400 feet, it's somewhere between 3 and 4, possibly taller, about 3 or 400 feet tall, possibly 500. It's ridiculously large. I mean, some of these things are absolutely enormous. Most of them are quite small, like this cat. This cat thing is probably only about 5 inches, maybe 6. And that's the general rule with the Martian carvings. They're all about that kind of size. So they're kind of life size, really, a lot of them, but many of them are smaller. There's things like monkeys, like Hanuman. This looks like a depiction of Hanuman here. There's horses. There's what look like grey aliens. There's Hanuman there again. There's a Hanuman statue. There's a giant sphinx. That's one I found years ago. That's over 200 feet long. It's probably nearer 250 or something. About the same size as the one in Egypt. It's massive. There are loads of these things. Some of them look kind of Olmec or Central American, like Mayan art or Olmec art. Very round and interesting looking, like those are. So do check these out. I mean, there are dozens and dozens of these. Some of them are made of gold even. This is a gold one here. So there are lots of these, and some of them are very, very strange. This one looks like Apollo here. So some of them look Greek. Some of them look like statues that are found in Central and South America. Some of them look Egyptian, some of them look like ancient Indian statues. So check out the headdress on this and imagine it coming out more widely either side at more of an angle, and that's what we have. It looks like Bastet, the ancient cat god, or goddess I should say, from Egypt. Now what would that be doing on Mars, I hear you ask? Yeah, well, good question. What would it be doing there? Well, perhaps they came from Mars. And this would explain some of the connections that Cairo has with Mars, as in the name meaning Mars. So, as I said, links will be below. I'll put some clips of some of those other sphinxes and statues and things like that in at the end, just for you to compare back to back. Cats do seem to be a bit of a theme on Mars, as well as they were on parts of Earth. So, thanks for watching, everybody. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure you have the bell icon pressed. See you soon.